Alright, cool. Starting.
At the dummies.
Yeah,
That might as well be a good place in the SNA to do it.
Alright, that's a cool idea. I'll let's group up then, and I'll come over to you.
I've actually got a Juggernaut I can use for it.
Fucking interface. Alright, so stream should be live now. Yeah, it looks it. Cool, alright, so this is the fourth of our training session classes. Tonight's one is Juggernaut PvE DPS, which is going to be courtesy of Zeetra, who is the officer in our guild in charge of Rogue Squadron. I think that is now our oldest raid team. In fact, you know, it was our first raid team essentially, isn't it? Like many iterations ago. Cool. So we've got a group on Fleet, an ops group if I convert it. Haha. So if anyone wants to come and join us, we're gonna. Well, Zeetra's already there. We're at the training dummies on Fleet. Obviously, like if you're watching this and you're not on our server, you can't come and join this bit, but you can still go and test it out on your own dummy. You know, try things out, Zeetra says, and then you can ask questions in the Twitch stream, and I'll relay them to Zeetra.
Or I could just open your Twitch stream.
Or you could just open the Twitch stream, yeah. But then you're gonna... Well, yeah.
It'll
Shit.
stop me from jumping around like a headless chicken.
It doesn't stop me, but yeah, okay. Alright, cool. Well, yeah, that's it. So, I'll hand it over to you, Zeetra.
Well, I'm just gonna begin by asking by how many of you are actually playing a Juggernaut, and in which capacity are you raiding with them, PvPing, just casual playing?
Nothing for me yet, but I'd like to learn it.
I just need to be aware of how deep I need to go into the ability names and what they do and stuff. So,
I mean,
speak up, people.
I'd say ability names and stuff like that I'm okay with, but everything else I'm dull.
Casper?
I played Guardian, but not Juggernaut.
Yeah, same with me.
Casper?
Why asking me? It's Zeetra that's doing the talk.
I'll be there only a chance for little small season for mercenary healer. After that, or maybe in the next week.
I don't know about mercenary healing, but
Me neither.
I know somebody who does. I can ask him. But back to Juggernaut. I do have a... Let me see. Yeah, I'm in my... I uploaded an Excel file that I use for my personal use. I don't want to know if you want to use it. Most of it's probably going to be gibberish. But if you want, you can download it, and it might have some interesting tidbits of information you can use. But there is a page on that's a direct translation of the ability names and the abbreviations that I use. It's in the TeamSpeak. If you just right-click on the training session in TeamSpeak and open file browser, you can download it there. So, all right. I'm going to be talking about I'm going to go around a few rotations. The thing about Juggernaut is that the thing about Juggernaut is that they are pretty, I wouldn't say simple, but they are quite straightforward in terms of playing as DPS. They only have a few abilities to worry about, and they don't really have any cooldowns. Real cooldowns, at least. They have Enrage and Adrenal, and that's about it. And everything else is about how you play it and how you raid as them. And I'm going to be discussing that a bit more than just the rotations. But I will touch upon a few rotations and just briefly explain them and why you want to use them and when you want to use them. Do you want me to talk about... You want me to... I need to turn off those announcements. That's really distracting. You want me to talk about utilities, or is that irrelevant, do you think? Just quick yes, no would do.
Well, I'd say if there's anything that helps towards passing on a dummy, for example, then yes, please.
No.
Okay, then
The
just raid.
Well, it's a raid situation.
Yeah, I'm mostly concerned about raid situation, but I will discuss the difference between raiding and dummy passing. There's really not much offensive in the utilities selection for the Juggernaut. There's most like the Path Carver Sweeping Slash does 25% more damage. That's pretty much the only offensive ability that you have. More or less, I'll try and go briefly into the utilities. All right, so I noticed that just like a week ago, some guy posted the first Juggernaut guide on Dolphins, and I read it, and he's got a pretty good understanding of the class if you want to read more. There's a few things that I do disagree with, but mostly he's got some good things to say. What he does say that is true is that Juggernauts are quite middle of the road in terms of single target DPS. They can hold their own on most single target fights, and if played very well, they can be up amongst the best. But where they really shine is their utility and their AoE ability. They have some of the best AoE of all classes in the game, if not the best AoE of all the classes, once you learn how to do it properly, which is not quite as simple as you would think. And then their what's the word? Justifying ability would be Saber Reflect. It's really useful both offensively and defensively. Though a big part of knowing the Juggernaut is knowing when and where you can use Saber Reflex for the most ability, you know. And then I'll just briefly gloss over the Enrage, the defensive cooldowns, because I've noticed a lot of Juggernauts that I've been raiding with that they forget to use the defensive cooldowns, and that's a really important part of playing a Juggernaut. What most people, as in DPS raid DPSing in general, tend to not misunderstand but forget is that DPS time is not only determined by your rotation and which abilities you use, but also how much you use those abilities, how much time you have on the bus. And a lot of bosses are not friendly to melee classes, which most of you probably already know. So the additional job for the melee class over the range class, where rangers have to avoid the mechanics and do their rotation basically, the melee also have to worry about being able to actually attack the boss and not be forced away from the boss due to mechanics. And every time you have to run away from the boss by doing a, running away with a bomb or facing AoE somewhere, running out of AoE somewhere, you lose a lot of valuable time on the boss in terms of DPS. So a lot of the tricks is to use your defensive cooldowns correctly in order to maximize the uptime you have on the boss. And this is more than the rotation you use, the most important thing when raiding as any melee DPS actually. Using your abilities to get the most uptime on the boss, and using your abilities to utilize as much of the boss mechanics as possible in order to gain the advantage. I'm talking about using Saber Reflect correctly, using your taunts correctly, using your AoE abilities correctly, knowing when to use single target and when to use AoE, and knowing which of your mobility abilities like Mad Dash, Force Charge, utilities that increase your speed and all these things you want to use and when to use them in order to get to your next target as fast as possible, because that is the one most important factor of who gets to be on the top of the DPS meters and who gets to contribute to the most to the fight. Of course, even more important than that is not dying, and that's also a really good time to look at your defensive cooldowns. So just starting from an end, we got Endure Pain, which, if you read the tooltip, it says temporarily increases your maximum health by 30% for 10 seconds. And this part is actually not really interesting, because you lose health as soon as it ends, which can take a healer by surprise. You'll suddenly be in 1%. It can help if you have a dot on you, especially a non-cleansable dot that you know is going to kill you, and the healers don't have time to heal you, or you're out of range, or the healer is dead or something. You use Endure Pain, and the dot wears off before Endure Pain. You will end up with 1 health, and that might save your life. But more important is the utilities you get and the additional effect it has by being a Vengeance spec. By the way, I forgot to mention, I'm only going to be talking about Vengeance because Rage just is not worth it for PvE at all. Don't even bother. So Vengeance also makes your Endure Pain give a 15% flat damage reduction. That's both internal and your internal elemental and your kinetic energy damage reduction, and it's got a 10-second duration, a 1-minute cooldown, making it a really good ability to use. Furthermore, in the heroic tier utility, you can make it increase your movement speed by 50%. And personally, I like to use it mostly for the movement speed increase and not so much for the damage reduction, but it really depends on the fight and the situation, because it's a really nice flat damage boost. If you know there are some mechanics that you cannot avoid, just pop that and you'll be taking less damage, making the healers work less hard and maybe prevent a wipe if they need to focus the DPS instead of the tanks, for example. But the 50% movement speed increase you will not notice as much when you're out of combat, because everybody has sprint activated, which is 35%, so it's only a 15% movement speed. But in combat, it makes you immune to slows, and it increases your movement speed by 50%. So it's really, really useful if you want to open the fight, and or if you need to move. Like, for example, I'm progressing a Brontes Nightmare, the last boss in Dread Fortress, and it is a must to have it for the Circle Droid phase. Next defensive cooldowns would be Enrage Defense. It makes every time you take damage, it will heal you, and this healing is stacked with attack power, so it actually works better for a DPS Juggernaut than it does for a tank Juggernaut. It can heal you as much like 8,000 on crits, even 9,000-10,000 depending on relic drops, which alone is more than enough to counteract any damage over time effect you will receive in an operation fight, even on Nightmare, if it can be cleansed. The issue with Enrage Defense is you can only activate it when you're below 70%, so either you need to use it when the healers are hard pressed, and you can tell the healers not to heal you before you are really low, so you can help them a bit with the healing. But mostly it's just something you pop and hope you get as many of the ticks off as possible before the duration wears off. So it's not your best defensive cooldown, but you don't want to forget it. The best defensive cooldown, I would say, would be Saber Ward. It does have a 3-minute cooldown, and it's got another hidden effect than what it says in the tooltip. It's specific to all Sith Warriors, I believe, or it might be... Hang on, I'm actually not sure if it's Sith Warrior or Juggernaut. Looks like to be Juggernaut only. Yeah, blade turning. The first 2 seconds you use it, it gives you 100% melee and range defense. It's not often, but there are a few mechanics, I can't name them right on top of my head, that only uses melee defense. This means you'll be immune to them for the first 2 seconds, meaning that if you time it, you might be able to avoid entirely one mechanic that would otherwise kill you, but it's not often used for this. Besides that, it's got a 50% defense bonus on top of your base, which is usually around the 5%. It's a 55% defense bonus, so you need to save this mostly for when you need to off tank, and this happens if often if you're doing Nightmare and your team knows how to utilize the Juggernaut class, probably, because it will really reduce your damage to the point where they won't know DPS is tanking. And a secondary effect is that there's a flat damage reduction on force and tech attacks for the 12 seconds it lasts, which I would generally prefer using Endure Pain first, even though there's 10% difference. But if you really are lacking a cooldown, then use Saber Ward. For example, on the second boss in Terraform Beyond, the Council, the lightning fields from Hyred, I think it is, can be reduced a lot by using Saber Ward. Alright, the third defensive cooldown that's probably also the most overlooked and the most important, I would say, is Threatening Stream, which is a recent addition. It makes you take 60% less damage from AoE abilities for the duration, and it's only got 45 seconds cooldown. So, I mean, that's... and 15-second duration, so that's 33% uptime of 60% damage reduction from AoE abilities. This makes a lot of mechanics a lot easier for Juggernauts to survive, to the point where you can probably avoid even stepping out of certain AoE things if you want to, and if you know that the healers can manage at that specific point during a fight. But it's another of the traits that makes a Juggernaut worth taking, because aside from snipers, nobody's got that much AoE damage reduction. All right, so that's the defensive cooldowns. Of course, there's the med pack as well that you don't want to forget using, but you can only use that once per fight. Is there any quick questions regarding the defensive cooldowns before I continue?
It's not a question, but I have one thing I'd quickly like to add.
Sure.
When I was at work today, I found this link. Since you were talking about Saber Reflect, it shows you a lot of the fights where you can use Saber Reflect and what bosses and stuff like that. So I thought that's quite relevant.
Yeah, there's also a list on the Dolphy guide. I'll
Okay.
get back to Saber Reflect. Well, actually, I can just gloss over it now because it's not that complicated. But basically, you have to remember that the damage is capped at 24k per tick. So that means if you are standing in something or getting hit continuously by something that does more than 24,000 damage, you'll be able to do a shitload of damage. And with the utility that increases the duration to 5 seconds, you can do like 120k damage just by using Saber Reflect. That's a huge DPS boost. But of course, you have to prepare yourself for being possibly over-aggroing, or even better, prepare the tanks that you'll probably be over-aggroing, so they know how to taunt, and they can even taunt before, so they're guaranteed to keep aggro for those 6 seconds, and then they need to taunt afterwards, because once you taunt, you don't build aggro. You're just forcing it to attack you, and then when you taunt again, it takes the person with the most aggro and add 10%, or was it 15% on top of that. So it'll also help the tanks keep aggro from everybody else.
Quick
So,
question. No,
About
sorry, I'll
knowing
wait.
Saber Reflect, it's just about knowing which bosses it's worth doing, which bosses your group will allow you to do. Certain bosses you might need some help doing, like for example Karaga. You want the tank to stack as many all sticks on top of each other, and you can reflect them all, or Thrasher on Skommerudani. About placing the fire bombs, or fire dudes firebox as close to each other as possible. If you can overlap them, you can hit 3 at the same time, doing massive damage, and so on and so on. As Casper so linked a list, and you can also find that list on Dolphy's guide. But generally, just trial and error. Question?
There's a couple of questions in TeamSpeak. I don't know if they're relevant to this bit. One of them's in Foreignese, and the other is Ultorian from Guild says, what is the importance of bleed order? What is the bleed importance order? Proc for Scream.
I'll get to the rotation in a second.
Is that later? I don't know what the other one says. I don't know if that's... There's a lot of Z's in it. It's some weird language. Do you get what that says?
It's not Danish, I can tell you that.
I have a quick question though. If you take, let's say, 50k damage and use Reflect, which as you say is capped at 24k, do you then take the rest as damage?
No. Well, it actually depends on the mechanics. Sometimes it negates all the damage, or other times it doesn't negate at all, but still reflects. I think most of the lists you can find will mention whether you take damage or not, but there's a few where you do take damage and need to use a defensive cooldown, or really tell the healers that you're going to be taking damage, and there's some where it just negates the damage, making it a really good defensive cooldown as well.
Okay, cool.
I can talk about the lists later, but I think it's easier for you to just read them yourselves.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a no-brainer. All right, let's see. All right, before I go to the single target rotation, I want to discuss the AoE rotation, because I don't know if you downloaded the Excel file that I uploaded to TeamSpeak, but I did the math on the ability damage, calculating the debuffs there on the targets from the class B debuffs. I calculated effective crit chance. I calculated passives. I calculate everything. So that's the average damage per activation that I have listed in the row called total damage. And even if you can't see it, I'll tell you right now. Shatter is the ability that does most damage per activation. It's not instant, but with the bleed, it's quite powerful, and it's all internal, meaning that it takes more damage if you have a Marauder or a what's the other class that does internal sniper operative if they play the poison spec, and I think there's one more, but I can't remember it just right now. So Shatter is the most important ability in terms of damage per activation. Impale would be the second most damaging ability in terms of per activation, well, in terms of per global cooldown, let me say it like that, and Force Screen would be the third. Ravage does more damage per activation, but less damage per global cooldown, so it's not really bursty. What you will notice if you do the math on most of the Juggernaut's ability is that the difference between the most damaging ability and the least damaging ability is not that high, which means that Juggernauts, on top of having a 12-second rotation, they don't have any abilities with longer than 12 seconds cooldown, is the most sustained DPS class, pretty much of all classes, maybe aside from Marauders, but Marauders have cooldowns to make up for the lack of cooldowns the Juggernaut has. So you don't really have a burst phase in your rotation unless you really line it up with Adrenals and Relics and set bonus procs and all these things. But you have low crits, but you also have high minimum damage hits. And which I'll also mention later, the rotations, there's really not many things you can do wrong in the rotation. There's a few different rotations and a few different openers, but all in all you'll be using, at the end of the day, the same amount of pretty much any ability. And that means that you won't be seeing huge differences in the damage you do compared to other Juggernauts just by using another rotation. So you'll have to use your AoE abilities and your Saber Reflect to get the advantage. And that's why I want to discuss the AoE rotation first. So as I mentioned, Shatter does the most damage because of the bleed, Impale does the next most, and Force Scream does the third most. Force Scream's bleed is not worth spreading with your Vengeful Slam, since Vengeful Slam spreads your bleeds. And Shatter is the longest bleed and does the most damage, so you want to spread your Shatter. Unfortunately, it's a DPS loss if you want to keep Shatter up permanently and the adds live for more than 12 seconds, because then you'll have to use Shatter, Vengeful Slam, and then when you'll have to delay your second Vengeful Slam for the second Shatter, seeing as Vengeful Slam has 9 seconds, Shatter have 12 seconds cooldown, so you need to use Vengeful Slam as if it had 12 seconds cooldown as well. And Vengeful Slam does a lot of damage. It's a really powerful AoE ability. So the reason why you want to keep a bleed up on the maps is that your sweeping slash, your spammable AoE ability does the most damage well, it does a lot of damage. If you do the math, you can see that if you're attacking one enemy, it's of course not worth it. 2 enemies, it'll be doing less damage per activation than any of your other abilities, but it'll be doing more damage per rage than any of your other abilities. Now, if you include the bleed and dodge spread from Vengeful Slam, you need 3 targets before your rage damage per rage from Sweeping Slash does more damage than both Impale and Force Stream. So this means 2 targets, use your normal rotation, and prioritize Vengeful Slam, ignore Ravage, and use Sweeping Slash as much as your rate allows it. That is the highest DPS you can do on 2 targets. Just to optimize Shatter, Impale, and Force Sweep, keep these up. Vengeful Slam on cooldown, and spam Sweeping Slash in between. That's 2 targets. It ignores your single target rotation completely if you want to take advantage of the most DPS. Most of the time, it really depends on the ad's lifetime, how much health they have, how many other people are AoEing it, and so on and so forth. You will only get to use maybe 2 free Sweeping Slashes, and that is if you don't run out of rage before, then you'll probably only get to use 1 or 2. But it's still a DPS increase, and you might have to skip a Ravage entirely in order to keep your Shatter up full time. Free targets, however, now it's getting interesting, because now you have to completely forget about your single target rotation. The only thing that is worth using on free targets would be Shatter and Sweeping Slash. These 2 abilities are the only ones that make sense, and of course Vengeful Slam to spread the bleed. But as I mentioned earlier, if the targets live more than 12 seconds, you will have to delay your Vengeful Slam use in order to keep the bleed up. So what I usually do is, if I can tell the adds are going to live more than 12 seconds, I will be using Impale, 1 global cooldown before Vengeful Slam comes on, and then I'll be spreading the Impale dot. It's not quite as potent as Shatter, but it keeps a bleed on the add until you can reapply Vengeful Slam with Shatter and get that one up again. So you won't have 100% uptime with Shatter bleed, which is the most powerful, but you will have 100% bleed uptime, and you'll be able to use 1 more Vengeful Slam depending again on the mob's health. So just to optimize, Shatter, Vengeful Slam, And depending on your rage level, you want to use Sonic Assault here, and then just spam Sweeping Slash until you have 3 seconds left on Vengeful Slam. Look at your rage. How much rage do you have? If you have more than, what's that? 5, I think it's around 5 raids in this case, because you want to be able to use Impale, 4 rage, and then be ready with a Shatter afterwards. So Impale, when there's 1 global cooldown left on Vengeful Slam, Sonic Assault before that if you don't have enough rage, Vengeful Slam, and then back to Sweeping Slash until you can use Shatter again. Again, it depends if there's 1 huge ad with a lot of health, and 2 small ads that you know will be dying earlier than the big ad. It might be worth keeping a single target rotation. It might be worth keeping a single target rotation on the big one, and then just do dodge press and Vengeful Slam on the small ones, in order to keep the DPS up on the big one. Again, it always depends on the situation, but just keep in mind, if you have the ability to hit more than 1 target, do so, and change your rotation accordingly. This will take some practice, knowing when you need to focus on AoE, when you need to focus on single target, and how to mix these 2 rotations together. But that's one of the key secrets, so to say, of playing a Juggernaut. Any questions regarding AoE? No? Alright. I'll move on to single target rotations now. As I mentioned earlier, the DPS difference of using different rotations isn't really that big. Mostly it's a matter of how the boss pulls. If it's a boss you can start right next to, if it's a boss you need to run to, if it's a boss that charges you, all these things. If you don't know where the boss will spawn, like on Brontes or on what's the other one? Well, a certain boss I can't remember right now. There's different ways you need to prepare your opener. My favorite rotation, and the one that I've been using recently, because it's a bursty opener. It sacrifices the quote best DPS optimized rotation quote end for a bigger burst in the beginning, which can be quite good for small beginning phases. For example, the most recent boss I've done this on, except for bronzes, would be on Tyrants. No, yeah, Tyrants. Is it Tyrants or Raptors? The 4th boss in Dread Fortress. It's Raptors. Never mind. Where he'll jump you. You have like 10 seconds DPS time, and then you'll be teleported on top of the roof. So you want to do the most damage in those 10 seconds as possible. And this is a really good example where this rotation will work. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna link it in the TeamSpeak channel so you can see it. Copy paste from earlier.
All these things that are being put in TeamSpeak, I'm gonna put in the forum post, as long as that's alright to use, Zeetra.
Sure.
So you can grab them after the session if
You'll
you're
also be
watching
able
this
to
later.
see it if you downloaded my Excel file. It's also in there somewhere.
Well, can I upload that somewhere? I'm not sure where. I'll try and put it on the Wookie site somewhere and then link to that. I'm not sure how to upload files.
I made it for my own personal reasons, like a hobby, theory crafting. So much of it will probably be gibberish to people who doesn't want to. I use my own systems in my own, but it might help you. It might not. It might. I'll be happy to explain exactly how I do things in the Excel file and how to read it, but it's not mandatory, so to say.
Do you look at the main game forum? The posters in the general forum at the Star Wars site. Do you ever look there?
Sorry, say again?
The forum post is the one in the general forum on the Star Wars site. Do you ever look there? Like, will you look at? Well, if anyone asks any questions in there, then I'll just ask you myself and then relay it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, cool.
I think
Alright.
this is gonna work. See.
Yeah, ouch.
Yeah. I just called it rotation 2, and just force stream opener is what I call it. So the reason why I'm using force stream as a first ability here is to proc. It's the worst of your 3 main abilities, which I already closed over earlier, with Shatter being the best and Impale the second best. The reason why I'm using force stream is to proc your 6 set piece bonus, which makes your Impale a guaranteed crit. And And the reason why I want to proc this in the beginning is that I am guaranteed to have both relics up for this part, making for a huge impale crit. And well, that really helps on the burst. That's pretty much the only burst, especially since you'll both have both relics and your adrenal and a guaranteed crit. It makes, I've seen 17,000 impale crits, which is, if you ever play a Juggernaut would know, is quite a bit of damage for a Jug to hit 17,000. The second ability that I'm using is Shatter because it is the most damaging ability per activation that you have in your arsenal, so you want to keep this up full time. And the third ability is Impale. There's different ways of using an opener. You can use Force Stream first for the reason that I just specified. It procs your set bonus. Impale applies a 5% melee damaging debuff, so you want to use that before your first Ravage. Shatter does not take any melee damage, it's pure force and internal. So if you have a Sorcerer, you're gonna be happy. If you have a Marauder that applies an Annihilation Mortar that applies an internal damage debuff, your Shatter is also going to be very happy. Impale is also a really good ability. It's the highest white damage ability you have per activation. Ravage does more per activation, but not per global cooldown. But it's not. It doesn't do as much overall damage as Shatter does, mostly because Shatter is pure internal, which means it ignores all armor. Of course, you want to open with Sundering Assault because it procs your 2% damage bonus, 2-set piece bonus, which is 2% damage bonus, 50% uptime on Sundering Assault, and it gives you the armor debuff on the target, and it makes, well, it gives a lot of rage. So for the optimal Juggernaut rotation, you want to use Sundering Assault on cooldown. I'll get back to this point, but that's not always viable, and it's not always the best solution depending on the fight. But on a dummy situation, Sundering Assault on cooldown gives you the most rage through your rage machine. And we know rage equals damage, abilities, more rage means more damage, and so on and so on. So in this rotation, I'm forgoing the Impale, which does a nice 5% damage, which works on all melee abilities. Shatter, which is a really good ability to have up in the beginning, but use Force Stream to proc the auto crit. I should probably mention how to read the rotation that I listed here. I take it by rows, so you start with the left row, Sundering Assault, Force Stream, Shatter, Impale. Then I have two dotted lines, which is fillers, but you want to use your Ravage if it's single target, so that's a Ravage share for 2 global cooldowns. Vengeful Slam, which Vengeful Slam can always be replaced by Vicious Throw if you have that up. I'll get around to that a bit later as well, because there are optimal places to use your Vicious Throw and optimal places to use your Vengeful Slam. I'll probably, on the next rotation, I'll get into that. And then Force Stream at the end, and then I'm starting over again with Sundering Assault. So this is 12 seconds or 8 global cooldowns, because Shatter and Sundering Assault are the two abilities with 12-second cooldown. So that's basically one rotation line. And then in order for everything to line up perfectly, and you'll be using everything on cooldown as it comes off cooldown, which is obviously the most damaging way you can play the class. You then use Sundering Assault, Impale, Shatter, and other Ravage, because that fits in there. Force Stream, Vengeful Slam again as a filler, always to throw, and Impale, and then the last one, Sundering Assault. And then there's one filler here. If you've been using your Vicious Throw correctly, and if you have a little bit of RNG, it's a little bit RNG dependent, but it's minimal. It's absolutely minimal. It's not worth mentioning, even though I just did. I'm silly. You will have your Vicious Throw for this filler, otherwise you'll be forced to use Saber Throw. And if you're doing a dummy pass, using Saber Throw is the most, even though it's a pretty good ability, it does 3 raids and it does more damage than your Vicious Slash, almost more damage, slightly less actually. It's a huge DPS loss using Saber Throw. So the less Saber Throws you can get off during a Juggernaut pass, that's gonna be the determining factor if you're doing passes, whether your DPS will be higher or lower. Of course, it's also RNG, depends which abilities crit, how many crit, and all these things, but Saber Throw is a DPS loss if you can avoid it. But that takes a lot of practice, knowing exactly when to use Vengeful Slam and using Vicious Throw and a bit of luck. If you don't have Saber Throw and if you don't have Vicious Throw, the best ability to use as a filler would be Force Push. And you don't often think that, but it's rage neutral. It neither generates or costs rage, and it does quite decent damage compared to a filler. It certainly does more than Assault. You don't want to use Assault ever. So Force Push is a decent filler if you have no other choice, but again, obviously you might think that's gonna be a huge DPS loss, and you would be right. And then continued Shatter, Force Scream, Vengeful Slam, Impale, and again another Ravage. So using this rotation and the other two rotations that I'm going to link in a second, you'll be using your Shatter, your Impale, your Force Scream, and your Sundering Assault on cooldown. So clipping any of this or not using it as soon as it comes off cooldown is obviously when you're doing something wrong. So you want to use all these abilities on cooldown. Now I will say, no, actually I'll say that later. Sorry. Yeah. Any questions on this rotation? Because the next one is going to look a lot like this one. All right, I'll go along and link the next one. And again, I just gave it a name. This one does have an initial opener that is a little bit different. It's a Ravage Opener. You probably notice some Juggernauts prefer using and recommend to other people to use Ravage before you use Shatter, because Shatter resets the cooldown of Ravage. And either way, which one you're using, it's neither incorrect or it's not correct. But the difference in DPS is minimal. The advantage of using Ravage before your other openers is, I'm gonna link it here in a second. Hang on. I think I have it here. Training session. No. Okay. Rotation 3. There we go. All right, so this is my Ravage Opener, rotation 3 or whatever you want to call it. I came up with these rotations, so I didn't really bother giving them a name since it's for my own personal use and now for your use as well, so I just came up with something quick. So the initial opener here is Sundering Assault. So this means you need to be able to start in a melee position. Oh, I forgot to mention the other rotation. It doesn't have an opener. It's just directly on with Sundering Assault, but it does not hurt the rotation using Saber Throw first. But of course, Saber Throw, as I mentioned, more Saber Throws, less DPS. So not using Saber Throw is best, but there are a lot of boss fights where it's one additional ability you get in. It depends on the range that you pull the boss, which also takes some trial and error and some experience with the raids. So if you know that you can go to 11 meters before pulling the boss, you'll most likely be able to do it without using Saber Throw if you time it correctly. If you can mount up before the fight starts, you'll be able to use Sundering Assault without Saber Throw, and so on and so on. But generally, if it's a matter of waiting a global cooldown before you can hit the boss, or using Saber Throw and then starting your rotation, then by all means go ahead and use Saber Throw. On that note, I should probably say you never ever want to use Force Charge to open a fight. Force Charge is a crap ability if used offensively. It does generate rate, yeah, it does, but it does so low damage that it's just not worth using. Your Assault does more damage, enough said. Your normal Assault ability does more damage than Force Charge. So never open with Force Charge. And Force Choke does more damage than Force Charge as well. That should give you an idea. The only time you want to use Force Charge is if you need to move quick to another target. And yes, it will be a damage loss because you use Force Charge and you need to get back as well, which is often another further damage DPS loss. But there's only a handful of fights where you want to use Force Charge. What it does have going for it, it doesn't interrupt, it doesn't lock out the mob's ability to use the ability, but it forces them to restart casting, which can be useful on certain fights, like Common Villainy, OEC City if you need an additional interrupt, or on Graxis and Dread Fortress when you need an additional interrupt. You can do that in Nightmare though, and so on, but you don't want to use it as an opener. Alright, that was a bit sidetracked. Where was I? Yeah, Sundering Assault, Impale, Ravage. That's the opener on the rotation 3. And that's just because you want to use Sundering Assault and you want a bit of time for things to line up. So this is a Ravage Opener if you're into that sort of thing. I was saying that the difference between using Ravage and not using Ravage as an opener is, of course, one more Ravage before the end, but since we already determined that Ravage is low per global cooldown but high per activation, it means less DPS but probably more overall damage. But the difference in a 12-second rotation, whether you use one more or one less Ravage, is you don't notice it. But you need to do it for this rotation to work, and obviously use Impale first, so you get the 5% melee damage debuff on the target, making Ravage do more damage, and your next Impale do more damage as well. Shatter, Force Scream, Vengeful Slam, Impale, Sundering Assault, and other Ravage. Force Scream, Impale, another Ravage, Sundering Assault, Force Scream, Vengeful Slam, and so on. This one is a lot more designed for clever use of it's basically not the best opening rotation in terms of damage per global cooldown, but it works very well in order to get a high pass, dummy pass, because you know when there are optimal places to use your Vengeful Slam and when to use your Vicious Throw. And for example, the best place to use your Vengeful Slam here, Vicious Throw, would be in the first on the last row, which would be instead of the first Vengeful Slam just after your Force Stream in the beginning, or just before you get to that point, and you should be able to squeeze in another one without having to resort to the Saber throw. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because I can imagine that this is a bit complicated with the rotations. I'll just leave them in the TeamSpeak, and you'll be uploading them to the forum, where you can look at them and practice whichever one you want, but I will repeat myself because it's important, bears repeating. The rotation you use makes very little difference for exactly how the fight goes. However, this last rotation I'm going to link is really good to know, because I use it. I call it Fallback Rotation, because it's a really good ability rotation to fall back on if you mess up, or if you don't know exactly how to do your opener, or if you mess up, or if there's a target swap or anything of that caliber, because it is extremely flexible. You can do mistakes and easily get into it again, whereas the ones I've been linking now, they're quite punishing if you do a mistake and you can't get into it again, because you have a cooldown to be screwed around. And this is also the one I'm using the most on boss fights. It might not be the one that does the most damage, but since it's flexible, I can incorporate a lot of the boss mechanics like Reflect and taking damage from AoE, which also generates rage, or getting hit, which also generates rage, without clipping my rage using too many Sundering Assaults. So I'm going to list this one as using Sundering Assault on cooldown, but as I already stated, there are a lot of situations where you have too much rage from taking damage, or having to force charge something also gives you additional rage that you want to burn, or if the rotation just doesn't line up because you have to run away from the boss, or hide, or there's downtime on the ads, so you have to use your AoE rotation, or any sort of possibilities that makes the other rotations not work anymore. This is the one that you want to be in your fingers, so you automatically revert to this rotation. I'm still trying to get it to copy, but a little bit naughty to me right now, I think.
What's this one called?
I'm just calling it the Fallback Rotation. Or Rotation 1, whatever you want, give it a new name, I don't care. I just included an opener because that's one. If you want to open with a rotation, I don't recommend it. On a dummy pass, I wouldn't use this one as an opener. You want to use Saber Throw and Enrage. Alternatively, you can use Sundering Assault and then just ignore the Sundering Assault and cooldown and replace that with another filler. Every time it says SA, which is the abbreviation for Sundering Assault, just replace it with a filler and use Sundering Assault whenever you need the rage. The most important thing about this rotation is you want to Shatter, Impale, Filler, Force Stream. Those 4 abilities, just remember Shatter, Impale, Filler, Force Stream, and everything will line up. Just as long as you keep your rage above 5 at all times, unless you know you're about to use Sundering Assault and just need one more Force Stream, it's going to work. So if you want to use this on a dummy, this is the rotation you want to use. If you want to use it on a boss, you won't be able to recognize the thing that I just linked in TeamSpeak, because it'll change. And as soon as you don't use your Sundering Assault on cooldown anymore, you can't really call it a rotation. It's just a priority system. But you will notice after a lot of playing and being aware of your rotation, there are certain... I did it again. Good job, Zeetra. There are certain patterns that you'll be repeating. For example, I often find myself using Shatter, Impale, Ravage, Force Stream, Saber Throw, Vengeful Slam before I can use my Song of Swords, something along those lines. Or was it Saber Throw before Force Stream? Yeah, it's probably using Saber Throw as the filler there. So as I said, since this one is very friendly to improvisation and is extremely flexible, you can use... You will have to use Saber Throw once in a while, and while it might be a DPS loss, you will regain that DPS and being able to adjust to the situation in a raid environment, or just by not screwing up an already screwed up rotation by trying to get into it again. That's gonna cost you a lot of DPS if you try that on a dummy pass. So this is also a reason why I think dummy passing on Juggernaut and raid environments on Juggernaut are two vastly different things, because you might learn a rotation on a dummy, but you won't be able to use it exactly that's the way you do it in a raid, because there's so many factors that you have to consider. Multiple adds, raids gains from AoE damage taken or from being hit, or even certain utilities like unyielding in the skillful gives you rage when you're stunned or knocked around, which also happens in certain boss mechanics. So this one is really good to learn. Just Shatter, Impale, Filler, Force Stream, and everything else will line up if you just remember those three abilities, and then use Saber Throw, Vengeful Slam, Vicious Throw as a filler, Ravage between all shatters, and Sundering Assault whenever you need the rage and not necessarily on cooldown. Though theoretically using Sundering Assault on cooldown is most DPS, just use it whenever you need the rage, because clipping rage is a DPS loss, and there's a certain point when using Sundering Assault on cooldown and clipping the rage you get from Sundering Assault just doesn't add up, and you actually lose DPS by using Sundering Assault. And Saber Throw will actually gain you more DPS since it does more damage than Sundering Assault. For example, you're on 9 rage, you have everything on cooldown except for Sundering Assault and Saber Throw, and then obviously you want to use Saber Throw and not Sundering Assault. Alright, any questions? Because I'm not gonna be going into any more single target rotations. Have what I said made sense yet?
Most of it has, yes.
Wow, the silence.
Yeah, man, I think everyone's just engrossed. So.
Alright, so I said I haven't talked about Enrage yet. I said that Juggernauts don't have any offensive cooldowns. This is not entirely true. They have one, it's called Enrage, and most Juggernauts don't realize this as an offensive cooldown because, I mean, it generates rage, it does no damage. Why even have it on your hotkey bars if it does no damage? That's how a Marauder would think, by the way. But yeah. Nothing personal, just a little joke. Enrage, yeah, you certain, especially in rotation 2, there is a that's rotation 3, my bad. There is, you can use your an additional Vengeful Slam or an additional Vicious Throw plus an Enrage instead of a Sundering Assault, or even better, save your Enrage in rotation 1, the fallback rotation, to just keep up for example, if you know you need to use Impale and Force Stream, but that will leave you on 3 or 4 rage, you won't be able to use Shatter, but if you know you have Enrage coming off cooldown, you can use that and just ignore one Sundering Assault or one Saber Throw, and then use Enrage instead. It's a really good offensive cooldown, but it takes some practice knowing when to use it. I have seen certain Juggernauts just not using it at all because they think it's like an emergency button in case they screw up. But if you have enough confidence in your rotations and in your class in general, you don't need it as an emergency button and can start using it offensively, because it does not take a global cooldown to use Enrage. It's instant, you can use it in between abilities. So aside from knowing when to use Vicious Throw, when to use Enrage, how to manage your rage, how to use Reflect, and which opener to use, you're pretty set to on Juggernaut, and then of course utilizing your AoE. There are a few more tips I'm going to go through, just a couple, that that might be also interesting for experienced Juggernaut players, things I might not have realized, or well, most of it you probably realize, especially this one, Ravage clipping. How many knows about Ravage clipping?
If it is what I think it is, then yes, I know it.
Yeah, it's quite common knowledge. Basically, Ravage is a 3-second channel ability. It hits twice with approximately 25% damage, and then the third hit deals 50% damage. But the thing is, the third hit doesn't hit when 3 seconds is over. It hits at 2.7 seconds into the duration of the channel. So that means if you consistently manage to interrupt your Ravage at 2.7 seconds, this takes a lot of practice, by the way. If you do it consistently, you will gain a lot of DPS because it will move the entire queue of your abilities 0.3 seconds closer to each other, which means having like 30% additional accuracy. That is quite a bit. Alright, not 30% because you have to divide that during the 10 seconds window you're actually using a rotation, but it's a lot of alacrity it equals. So practice using Ravage and then clipping it just as the third ability hit. I figured at the beginning when I started practicing this, I used sound a lot to help me know when it hits, because there's a certain, when you use Ravage as a zoom ability sound it generates, and if you just learn to recognize this, you will know exactly when to use your next ability to clip Ravage at the right time. But more precise would be a visual look at it, but that can be an issue in raids because oftentimes every melee and tank and sometimes even ranged DPS is clouded up in one big clusterfuck of a party group hug, and you won't be able to see your own avatar, so that sometimes it's quite difficult to know it. You can look at your cast bar, but I find that unreliable because of latency and all these things, so it's better to just practice it and know exactly when to do it. When it starts becoming automatic and you just clip your Ravages without thinking about it, you'll know you've done it. But this is one really huge DPS boost you can get both on dummies and on raids if you practice this part, if you don't already know it. So another tip is the newest ability Juggernauts get, Mad Dash. You will notice it does quite low damage, and you will also notice that it does not generate any rage. What it does do, however, is an incredible defensive cooldowns. It'll help you negate certain mechanics because you're immune to damage when you do it. Some mechanics in hard mode cannot be negated in nightmare mode. I found out the hard way. For example, Titan 6 and Scum and Villainy. On hard mode, you can charge through his explosion without taking damage. You cannot do that on nightmare. Same as Brontes on hard mode. You can charge through the electrical fingers without dying. Cannot do that on nightmare mode. But generally, it's a really good mobility ability for the reason that I'm going to specify now. Mad Dash activates a global cooldown when you activate it, but it only deals damage when you reach your target. So this also makes it a really, really good opener on dummy passes because you can activate it from 20 meters away, and by the time you reach your target and initiate combat and star power starts counting how much damage you've done during the duration of the fight, your global cooldown will already be reset, and you can use your Sonic Assault. So it's actually the one and only Juggernaut precast. Let me demonstrate on this dummy here. Wow, we actually get to use a dummy. Hooray!
Let me put you on focus so I
Alright,
can...
I'll do it again. I for some reason I deselected it. I have a cooldown now. But you get what I'm saying. It's when you activate it, the global cooldown already starts ticking, and once you reach your target, your global cooldown will be over, and you can use another ability, which is most often a Sundering Assault. So this is also a way to close the gap between your target, using Mad Dash before the tank pulls, but it really requires good timing, and you don't want to use it too early and be blamed for energy booling. You don't want to do that, especially not as a Juggernaut. I mean, mercenaries, alright, it happens, so it's almost expected. Marauders, sure, they just charge in whatever, but Juggernauts, that's a really, really bad thing to get on your reputation as a Juggernaut. Ninja pulling, don't want that. Generally, when I pull, I just pop my Endure Pain with movement speed bonus, so I move faster. I'm either mounted up or I'm standing as close to the boss as possible, and then if I'm more than 10 meters away, I use Saber Throw. If I'm less than 10 meters away, I just run in and Sundering Assault. It depends from boss to boss. If you're mounted up and stand at 50 meters, you can get away with just charging in when the tank charges, and then Sundering Assault without losing any DPS time. If you have a clear view of the target of the boss, you can use Mad Dash if you know you won't need it in the early as mobility ability soon, and then just stand at 20 meters. And all right, I'm gonna do it now. Mad Dash, Sundering Assault, and then on with my rotation here, and so on and so on. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Ravage clipping 2.7 seconds in, but if you have alacrity, it might be 2.6 seconds, depending on the cast time of the Ravage. It takes practice. Another reason why it's unreliable using your cast bar. All right, so that's Mad Dash, Ravage clipping. Did I mention Threatening Scream is really good as an AoE damage reduction? Defensive cooldown, Saber Reflect, Adrenals, medpacks, force push, rotations. Yeah, I think that's it. Of course, you have to remember that you also have force choke, force push, and intimidating roar in case you want to interrupt something. You can stun it if it's not immune to stuns. You have a really short duration on your disruption, your normal interruptibility, 12 seconds. Force charge, it works as an interrupt as well, but otherwise you don't want to use it. Bronzes, for example, it's good to use it on the droid phase, and Praxis as well on when you need to move far distances. But you generally want to avoid using force charge. Mad Dash is a really good ability. It also works as an AoE ability, but it does not do enough damage to justify using it just for the damage in an AoE scenario. I think that's it. Unless you want me to discuss utilities, I think I'm done, and it's time for question and answers.
Well, I'll start then. I have a pretty. I should have asked this at the other ones. I'm going to try and remember it for the others. What do you think the top 3 mistakes that you see people do as a Juggernaut DPS?
Yeah, I think I mentioned doing the fight, but I'll just summarize. Not clipping Ravage is probably the first one you do. Second would be using force charge, and third would be ignoring Enrage as an offensive cooldown. There are, of course, others, but I would say those are the 3 top mistakes that Juggernaut DPS can do. Does that answer the question?
Are there any fights where you think a Juggernaut isn't the most suitable to take?
Juggernauts are quite good middle of the road. I mean, they can perform really well on all fights, and there's not really a fight where you don't want a Juggernaut. There are a lot of fights where you do want a Juggernaut, however, and they can make up for a lot of the things they can't do by the things they can. So no, I wouldn't say there's a fight where you don't want a Juggernaut. I would say there are certain fights where other classes are better than Juggernauts if you have the option of choosing between classes. But if you're maining a Juggernaut, don't have other classes, and there is room for that melee class as a Juggernaut, because no raid team wants more than 2 melees unless they're really, really brave. Or they're 16-man raid team, of course. Then no, Juggernaut is a really good choice to have on a raid team. And I'm not just saying this because I play it, I say it also because objectively they can do a lot of tricks, and they can off-tank, they can provide speed bonus if you don't have a Marauder, they can provide Sonic Wall, very small defensive cooldown for the entire group, and they have some really nice utility they can abuse to get a lot of damage done, rivaling even Marauders. So if you know how to play your Juggernaut, you're a contender for the top spot of damage done in your race group, without a doubt. And you can also do off-point tanking.
Does anyone else have anything to ask? Silence. All right, dude.
Can I ask something? So I didn't hear. You said Juggernaut. At what fights are Juggernauts best at? At what bosses?
Best at?
I didn't exactly say, but I can. All right, let's see. The raids I've been doing recently is of course fresh in my memory, so I would say Bestia, First Boss and Dread Palace is really good to have a Juggernaut in because they are able to off tank really well, and they can move around quickly, interrupt tentacles. Let's see, another fight they are good at would be any fight they can Saber Reflect because that just means they do a lot of damage, especially if it means cheating some mechanics. I wouldn't. That's not really a fight where they would be best per se, but there's very few fights where they won't be viable option to bring. I remember Scum Villainy. I always pick my Juggernaut over my Assassin or Sorcerer, on most fights at least. Except for the last two on Nightmare. I use my Sorcerer for the Cartel Warlords and I use my Assassin for the Styrek. One of the few fights where an Assassin is actually a really good class to have is Styrek, but I'll mention that when I get to my Assassin training session. Does that answer your question?
Any more?
Well, Colossal Monolith is a real good boss for Juggernaut. But nobody really does that fight anymore.
It does seem to have died out. I remember like people fighting over it at one point, and now it's.
I think most of them are just doing something else while listening.
Fair enough.
Like me. I mean, I'm currently wiping at 0, so I have time to speak.
Alright, dude. Well, wrap
right.
it up then, you reckon?
Sorry, second?
You reckon it's time to wrap it up then?
Yeah, if you don't want me to discuss the utilities, I mean, I have a few things to say about the utilities, but...
Well, go for it. Throw it in.
You can probably... Alright, there's a mixed opinion about the utilities. Most of them are quite useful for PvP. A lot of these might work for certain fights in PvE. Now I don't have a screenshot handy right now, but if you know the names, you can probably... hang on, does the Dolphins utility calculator allow you to link specs? Hang on. My normal one I run with would be...
What's this you're putting in TeamSpeak? I'll try and copy it. I've been showing stuff in a notepad file overlaid.
Hang on, I'll see if Dolphy allows this.
You're trying to hot link directly to a picture.
Yeah, this seems to work. Does this work?
Testing. Crazy fucking
Nope, it
link.
doesn't.
Yeah, alright, links just to the calculator as a total.
Yeah.
It's linked me to the exact
Try this one.
skill tree.
This one looks right. This one looks right. Yeah, it works for me.
Well, it's linked me to the Vengeance skill tree. Is that what you wanted?
But you can see there's a difference in the link. The top one was just to the basic link. It's called.
I'm showing it in the stream if you can see it.
All right, hang
on. Let me.
Stream still shows.
Yeah, there's a slight delay. I'm just checking that. It's currently on the screen on my monitor, so it should be in the stream in a sec. But now, like, that was a few seconds ago for the people in the stream, so we're in a time vortex. Fuck.
Yeah, it works. I see it's updated now. Yeah, those are the that's my default utility set, and it works on pretty much all bosses, but there are a few utilities you want to use on certain bosses. On the skillful tree, Payback, that's the green one, reduces the cooldown of Unleash as your stun breaker by 30 seconds and causes Unleash to heal you for 10% of your maximum health when used. Not as much for the cooldown reduction on the stun, but giving you a heal when you are able to break something is quite useful. 10% of your maximum health, that's 8,000 healing. It can help the heals a little bit. So if you need to take one of the other ones that I've linked, you probably want to do that. Another one that works is Unstoppable, which makes you immune to stuns, especially in Scum and Villainy. There are quite a few fights where you'll be able to utilize Unstoppable, and also Dread Palace, I believe, if it just... No, Dread... If you know you're going to be stunned, you can use Unstoppable to not be stunned. Even it'll resist pretty much any stun mechanic, like what's it called? The Oasis City Infiltration boss in Scum and Villainy does a flashbang. If you know when it's coming, you can charge just before, and you'll not be flashbang. So you might use a force charge, sure, but no wait, that's the Vengeance. That's done. Anyway, my point is that's knockbacks. The Vengeance passive only gives you immune to stuns, but knockbacks is by Unstoppable. And I'm 100% certain that there are a few fights where it works, but I can't really. Bronzes, it works in bronzes. It would have been a good idea for me to prepare this part, saying exactly which bosses you want, which abilities, but you can use that, and if you don't want to use that, you can use Unyielding and get Rage instead, but generally you already have more than enough Rage from Deadly Reprisal, which gives you Rage every time you take damage from area of effect, or from the ability you get passive by being a Juggernaut when you get hit. Another possibility would be the Unshackling Rage, which makes your Enrage give your movement speed increase. Generally, I don't take this, but I know other Juggernauts do, because I like to use my Rage as in my rotation and not when I need to move from point A to point B. Sometimes it does come in handy either way, but well, I generally don't use it. Underlurk on Temple of Sacrifice, for example, that's why you want to use Pooled Hatred, and I believe the next person on the lurker, the Gate Commanders or whatever it's called, Gate Guardians, the 3 dudes there. You can also use Pooled Hatred for that fight, and there's probably a couple more, like, yeah, where you can use Pooled Hatred. That's an offensive ability, but it requires you to be slowed for it to work. Frankly, you don't want to take that one. Pressure is also quite useless. Emboldening Scream makes a speed bonus to any ally, not yourself included though, within 8 meters by 50%. So I use it in bronzes if we don't have a Marauder. You can also use it in certain other fights like Council Terror from Beyond and a few other fights. It's good to keep in mind, but I don't normally run with it. When I take Emboldening Extreme, I give up my Sonic Wall, which is a defensive cooldown for the group. Crushing Fist is also a good idea to have because it makes Vengeful Slam apply the armor debuff. This is really good when you need to change targets and you already have like 10 rage or more than 7 rage. You can use your Vengeful Slam as an opener and apply armor debuff. Also, I actually forgot to mention this. Vengeful Slam works pretty much the same way as Mass Dash. Not quite as much, but you can precast it if you know a target is going to spawn at a certain location and you know exactly when it's going to spawn. You can precast Vengeful Slam and your global cooldown will be approximately halfway done refreshing when Vengeful Slam hits. And also it will allow you to hit targets that you cannot yet target. Does that make sense? Like, it's an AoE ability that does not require you to target an enemy. For example, on Calphias, in Dread Palace, a lot of ads are going to spawn if they usually give off a red mist first, and you can target them, you can damage them, but sometimes Vengeful Slam will allow you to do damage to them before you can target them. This is really good to know if you want to just do a little bit more damage. It can make quite a bit of difference in the end. Sonic Wall is quite obvious. In Heroic, there's not many abilities utilities here. There's Intimidating Presence and Through Power that I usually take, increases the duration of your Saber Reflect and makes Endure Pain give you a movement speed bonus. You don't necessarily need to take your Saber Reflect thing if you know you cannot use it in the fight. Through Power I usually always take. Other options would be Through Passion if you know there's going to be a lot of dots on the fight and they'll be coming frequently. Another one you can take is Consuming Rage, which makes you cleanse your own dots, but again, it's not reliable since it requires you to be below 70% health, but sometimes it can help a healer. For example, on the Cartel Warlords in Scum and Villainy, on Nightmare, they give you a poison dot that you can cleanse with, well, there's a few different ways of cleansing it, but it does a lot of damage if you cannot self-cleanse. Also, Yeah, I wouldn't mention Nifra and Draxus, but those are quite easy, so don't mind that. So basically, the few other abilities otherwise besides those I've mentioned is pretty much every ability in Skillful has one use or another, depending on the fight or personal preference. Emboldening Scream and Pooled Hatred has a few uses. Through Passion and Consuming Rage has a few uses. Thrown Gauntlet, don't take it. Whiplash, don't take it. Intercessor, don't take it. And Through Victory, don't take it. Interesting one. Warbringer. It's also something I forgot to mention. Force Charge enables you to your next vicious throw to be used against a target with any percentage health. So using vicious throw as a finisher sub 30 will mess up your rage. There's no doubt about it. The Juggernaut class is not meant to be using vicious throw and pay raise for it, unless you want to sacrifice something or if you are experienced enough to modify your rotation to give you a bit more rage to use it. But it will be a DPS gain. However, Warbringer as a utility requires you to use Force Charge. So if you take it just to be able to use it, you are not going to be able to use it. If you, however, know that there are certain fights, for example, bronzes, where you can benefit from Force Charging to close the gap between one target and another, then it might be useful, but generally I won't take it. Alright? I think that's it. I have nothing more to say.
Anyone, any final questions?
All clear.
Alright. Thank you a lot for bothering to listen to me.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for putting that on.
Alright. Alright, thanks Zeetra. Thanks everyone. Tomorrow night is you'd think I'd know it off the top of my head at this point. Shit. Yeah, it's another Casper one. So Mercenary PvE DPS tomorrow night. Casper's running that one. 7 o'clock UK time. It will be on Twitch and it'll be on YouTube shortly afterwards too. Final words?
Well, if you have any questions, you know how to contact me, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions or explain how to use the Excel file that Ulavi is going to be uploading. And then again, thanks for listening.
What about healing class? And is there going to be a guide for a healing class like Sork or Merc or?
Yeah, the plan is at the moment we're full. We've got 2 nights free at the very end of this month of September to put a couple more in. What I've done is I've contacted all of the DPS who are the top 5 in each of the class tables in our DPS club, asking them first because it was easy to tell who the best is because they're the top the top scorers. So I'm hoping that we could fill the last 2 nights with them and carry it into October. And as we get nearer that time, I'm going to contact healers and tanks in our raid teams. I've asked the raid leaders. We've got 8 raid teams, so I've asked the raid leaders of each to give me a list of their tanks and healers, and I'll contact them nearer the time as a group mail to see who wants to volunteer to lead which sessions. But hopefully we want to cover all the classes. Why not? If people are willing to run them, then people want to watch them. It's well worth doing. Helps a lot of people, hopefully. So, I think the streams are good, but obviously we don't really have that many viewers. But I think the YouTube videos are the ones that are going to help the most when people can watch it in their own time, when listen to them at work, because they're more like podcasts really, since there's not much to display on the screen. So there you go. Alright, I'm gonna stop the stream. Here we go.